Well, hey everybody, it's Mike from Profiling Evil, and if you've been keeping tabs on Lori Vallow Daybell's case, even with this newest conviction, buckle up, because I recently joined Vinnie Politan and the team at Court TV to dissect some of the most bizarre, unsettling, and strategic moments that we've seen from Lori inside and outside of the courtroom, from her so-called heavenly visions to her storage unit with a deadly secret, all the way over to an attempted assassination in broad daylight. We're covering it all, so let's walk through this together. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, where we dig into the facts, we explore the psychology, and we break down criminal behavior one disturbing case at a time. And if you're here for truth over hype, clarity over chaos, and a real look at what makes evil tick, hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget to ring the bell so that you never miss a case update. And make sure you're checking us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Now today, we're diving into the mind and maybe the strategy of Lori Daybell, a woman who once prophesied to lead the chosen few, now claiming God placed her in prison to minister to the lost. She's a mother who says she stood in heaven and didn't want to come back. And she's a defendant who defied legal logic, representing herself in a murder trial, only to say nothing when it counted most. So what's the game here? Is it delusion, damage control, or something even darker? Because Lori Daybell thinks she stood in heaven and received direction to return and kill. So that's where I want to start with, because it left me cold in my tracks. It occurred when she was giving her statement after being convicted of murdering her children and her lover's wife. Lori Daybell recalled what she described as a visit to heaven. She said she felt no pain, no sorrow, and she didn't want to return to earth. She claims she was told that she had unfinished business on earth, promises that she made before she was born. Well, now fast forward to her Arizona murder trial, where she was just convicted of murdering her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Lori stunned everybody by choosing to represent herself, only to sit silent when it mattered most. There was no testimony, no witnesses, no defense. And it raised serious questions. Does Lori even care about this case? Was it complete indifference, or was this all part of a bigger plan? I joined Vinnie Politan on Court TV to explore this idea, and I was joined by my dear friend, Dr. Judy Ho, a clinical psychologist, and we talked about some of the courtroom footage that might reveal the answer to this question. And I want to just say, Dr. Ho is such a dear friend, and she actually wrote the foreword in one of my books. Now let's watch that first interview on Court TV.
I was a young mother, and you would think I wouldn't want to leave my children, but as I stood in heaven, I did not want to go back. I thought they would be fine without me because I was peaceful and I was happy and I was home. But then I was told by Jesus that I needed to go back and complete things that I had covenanted or promised to do before I was born. This caused me a lot of distress because I knew heaven was my real home, and I only wanted to be there. I was free from pain, emotional and physical. But then I was shown how I would help my children and others in the future. So ultimately, I did agree to go back to my body.
Okay. Then came her Arizona trial. And she decides to represent herself, but doesn't testify, doesn't present any evidence, doesn't call a witness, doesn't take the stand. So what about this case? Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Does Lori care about this case? I know attempting to travel inside her mind is a dangerous trip. But does Lori care about this case? Let's bring in our guests. Joining me, clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, expert in conducting forensic evaluations and author of the book, The New Rules of Attachment, Dr. Judy Ho, and retired police commander, religious cult expert, yes, we need that, host of Profiling Evil podcast, and author of the book, Deceived, which is not about her. It's about someone else. Mike King is with us. All right. Dr. Judy Ho, what are your thoughts here? In her first trial, she just sat by, let it all happen, didn't participate. Second trial, participates a lot by representing herself, but then when it's time to call a witness or testify, nothing. Does she care?
Well, hi, Vinny, and hi, Mike. You know, this is really baffling in some ways, but in other ways, perhaps not. I think that in her mind, all of her decisions make sense to her. We're underestimating the power of the self-justification process. So it's possible that in the first trial, she thought, well, I have nothing to prove. Truth stands for itself. I should be vindicated for my actions. I only wanted the best for people. It sounds like she kind of believes that type of narrative. And similarly, in this second case, she is standing there and she's saying, I'm going to represent myself, because she was probably unhappy with her attorneys for whatever reasons. But at the same time, because she believes in the power of her own actions and that perhaps they were right in her eyes, she's not doing so much of the homework, right? And I think we're also not speaking about the fact that someone who's never had true legal training, been a trial attorney, is deciding, I can do this. Things that people dedicate their entire lives to. I can go ahead and do this because I'm right.
And this is the one case, I think, involving her. And there's another one coming up. She has another trial coming up we'll talk about later. But, I mean, there was a potential to make some inroads here. Mike, before I have you answer, I want you to take a look at one of her moments of cross-examination. Because, again, she didn't present witnesses, but she did cross-examine. Let's take a look.
Did you interview our mother, Janice Cox?
I did not.
Did you read or watch her interview?
I have not.
Did you interview our sister, Summer Shiflett?
I did not.
Did you read or watch her interview?
No.
Did you interview our father, Barry Cox?
No.
Did you read or watch his interview?
No.
Like, did you ask my mother what she meant in that text message when she wrote it?
No.
Did you ask my sister what she meant in those text messages?
No.
Did you ask Melanie, my niece, what she meant in those text messages?
No.
Did you ask me what I meant in those text messages?
I couldn't.
All right, Mike. Does she care about this case? Does she care about the results?
You know, Vinny, I wondered early on if this was something for her psychologically to be in charge and to run this thing. And then when that interview happened just before the trial began, where she came out and positioned herself as kind of the savior among women in the correctional system, and that she's going in, I wondered if she was building the books for the fact that she has a long prison life ahead of her. And it wasn't going to change regardless of this case. But I see her kind of moving and ebbing and flowing with the tide as it changes. And as she starts seeing things working one way or another, she has to shift and move with that. And it just really came out clear to me as this thing started to unfold, and you could see her kind of throwing all her chips on the table and saying, yeah, I'm going to give up and let this thing take the course it's going to take, that she's in damage control right now. She's still trying to protect an image. I believe what happened in the courtroom today at the conclusion, just before that jury was dismissed, was all about fixing her credibility within the correctional system, that she was trying to get less said about all of the aggravating factors that led to this charge so that she can keep reminding people that she's this spiritual giant, that the God that she believes in wants her in prison helping them.
How about that, Dr. Judy Ho? Instead of leading the 144,000, she'll lead, I don't know, the 743 female inmates.
Well, Vinny, I know we've talked about, hey, is this person suffering from some type of delusion? And one of the forms of delusion is that you believe that you're so important and that essentially a lot of different things, a lot of different people are all counting on you. And to Mike's point, is it possible that now her delusion has just shifted towards what is ahead of her, as opposed to before, where some of her delusions were about the things that she needed to do or had to do to be right with God, to do his bidding? Now, perhaps this delusion has just expanded to this next potential phase of her life. It's possible she has that recognition that that's coming, but I think that she's still building this narrative in her mind that, well, that's where God is calling me, and that's where I'm going to do my most important work.
Yeah, I don't know if God's calling. Well, maybe. I don't know. Who am I to say? Anyway, Mike King's going to stick around. Dr. Judy Ho, thank you so much.
So let's dig a little deeper into what might be motivating Lori's behavior, especially when it comes to her image inside prison, because that's where she's staying for the rest of her life. Now, we've seen two drastically different versions of Lori in the media. Her first high-profile interview was with NBC's Keith Morrison, and Lori came across as defiant, combative, and confrontational. She didn't seem worried about optics or tone. It was almost like she was still living in this fantasy world, untouched by consequence. But then, fast forward just a few days before her trial for the murder of Charles Vallow, the second interview, where she talked with Brianna Whitney from True Crime Arizona. The tone had shifted dramatically. Lori appeared subdued, even sweet at times. She talked about her faith, her divine purpose, and she made it clear that she believed that she was in prison today by God's design so that she could help other women in the prison. And here's where I want to propose a theory, because if we take off that spiritual lens and put on a psychological one, a very different picture starts to emerge, in my opinion. Inmates who are convicted of crimes against children, especially their own children, are often socially destroyed inside prison walls, if not physically destroyed. The prison population holds very little tolerance for that kind of crime, and so survivors, lifers, and even hardened offenders tend to draw a hard moral line at child murder. So what do some of these inmates do to survive? They've got to rebrand. And that's exactly what I think Lori Vallow Daybell is doing. You see, according to Dr. Stanton Samenow, a forensic psychologist and the author of Inside the Criminal Mind, criminals will develop this narrative reframing strategy. It's kind of a mental gymnastics used to justify or redirect attention away from their crimes. It's not just something they use for parole boards. It's for self-preservation in the social hierarchy of prison. Lori might be crafting a new identity, not just for her own peace of mind, but for her physical safety and for what she perceives to need, or she always shows like she needs, control and influence behind bars. You see, if she can't lead the 144,000 into the New Jerusalem, maybe, as Vinnie Politan so appropriately pointed out, she's trying to lead the 743 women inside her correctional unit. Now, this lines up with a phenomenon known as pseudo-religious delusion, and it happens in incarcerated populations. In fact, there was a psychiatrist named Gillian Mezzi who taught this principle in a Psychiatric Times article. He stated that in prison environments, delusional ideation can become a means of psychological control or an adaptation to perceived martyrdom, allowing the offender to reposition themselves as a moral leader rather than a moral failure. In other words, Lori might be turning the narrative from "I'm a child killer" to "I'm a redeemer of broken women." And that's not just damage control. That's a long-term survival strategy. And it makes you wonder how much of Lori's courtroom behavior, her silence, her cross-examinations, her prison-centric messaging is all trial strategy, and much more is reputation management for the place that she knows she's going to be spending the rest of her life. You see, she might not have been defending herself in court. She might have been defending her legacy behind bars. So, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the Jeep, the gunshot, and the storage unit. Rewind to October 2nd, 2019. Brandon Boudreaux is pulling into his driveway after working out when suddenly a gunshot shatters his window. He saw the silencer flash of motion, and then he watched the shooter hit the gas and speed away. His first thought was, I'm being shot at. But the second thought was, that Jeep looks just like Tylee Ryan's Jeep. Lori's daughter. In fact, it was Lori's daughter who was already missing. And that wasn't random to him. In fact, it's appearing that it was absolutely planned, because later surveillance footage would show Lori and Chad Daybell and Alex visiting a storage unit in Idaho where they were dropping off things and picking up things that had to do with that Jeep. And in one of those visits, Lori and Chad were observed placing a tire inside the storage unit. Now this happened shortly before someone in a Jeep that looked exactly like Tylee's without the tire on the back fired a shot at Brandon Boudreaux and sped away. Days after that shooting, surveillance footage would pick up Lori and Alex Cox pulling the tire from that same storage unit, which ultimately ended back on that Jeep. Now that tire might end up being the quiet witness in the next case, and we talked about it on Court TV. So let's look at that segment as we consider how Lori directly aided Alex Cox in planning the movement and ultimately the conspiracy behind an attempted murder. Let's take a look.
On October 2nd of 2019, someone parked in front of my house and shot at me and tried to kill me. The window opened up and I saw a gun and a silencer. And my window shattered. I heard a bang, all kind of in the same amount of time. And my immediate thought was just, I'm getting shot at. And I, instead of turning my wheel and into my driveway, I just pushed the gas and drove straight.
And Mike, he recognized the vehicle that he saw, and it was Tylee's vehicle. But obviously Tylee at the time is missing. I want you to take a look at some of the video from the storage unit in Idaho, because what's significant in all of this is who is going back and forth to this storage unit, what are they bringing, what are they dropping off, and when are they doing it. And early on, this was a little confusing, some of the back and forth here, but it's clearly Lori who rented it, and you've got her going at one time with Chad, at another time with Alex. And one of the things that happens in one of these trips is that we see a tire returned to the storage unit. And when we see that tire returned, Mike, there it is, or the tire being taken away from the storage unit, it was kept there. To me, that is the clearest part of all this that sort of ties Lori to the tire. That's removed for this shooting.
I'm with you, Vinny, and I think it really ties her toward a conspiracy on this particular case, because she's there. She's there most likely loading it into that storage unit, and she's there when Alex comes to get it back on the Jeep after the attempted homicide occurs. And you can't listen to Brandon Boudreaux without immediately thinking this guy is so credible, and you just feel for him because he's trying to keep his family together. He's trying to figure out this mess. And just like Gigi said, all of a sudden, all of the different pawns in this chessboard are starting to fall off. And it really points to what was, in my opinion, a very, very surgical attempt to remove individuals, most likely, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out in the trial, that had something that Lori and Chad and Alex could gain from, likely insurance money. And in this growing game of chess, pawns on the board started being eliminated. So I want to take a look at a bigger picture right now. You've got this woman obsessed with spiritual missions and eternal promises. There's a tight circle that includes a doomsday prophet, a loyal brother, and a list of people who, one by one, either vanish or turn up dead. And when we zoom in on that October shooting at Brandon Boudreaux, you can't ignore what Vinny and I called a surgical attempt to remove a threat. Because in his statements, Brandon remained credible and steady. I mean, this guy seems like a person who's trying to protect his family, but he got too close to something that Lori, Chad, and Alex couldn't afford to let unravel. Custody, secrets, control. In this final segment on Court TV, I unpacked how Lori's behavior and these calculated movements of her inner circle revealed something darker than delusion. So let's watch that conclusion of our conversation.
Mike, we have about 25 seconds here. What are your thoughts about this trial? Because this is Lori Daybell's next trial for the conspiracy for the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux.
You know, Vinny, half of me thinks that the prosecution's going to say, hey, we've got enough. Lori's never going anywhere, if Brandon was agreeable to it. But I think we have to have this trial because I think it's going to expose more than just Lori Vallow Daybell. I think we're going to see co-conspirators who were involved, and whether they're ever charged or not, there are going to be tentacles to this case that maybe we'll talk about for years to come.
Mike King, Gigi McKelvey, great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for all your help and insight. You know, as Mike said, this story will never really end. I think it's because the hurt and the pain is so deep and so devastating.
Well, if this case doesn't leave you with more questions than answers, you haven't been watching the Daybell saga. It isn't just sitting back and waiting for her next trial, because I think she's calculating right now. She's maneuvering, and she might be playing the long game. One that doesn't end in the courtroom, but ends inside of a prison chapel. So drop your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd really love to hear your take. I mean, what do you think's really going on inside of Lori Daybell's mind? And don't be shy about jumping into the conversation with other people. Just keep it kind, thoughtful, and constructive as we work through these tough cases together. And you know, I kind of think that the state might drop the final charge against Brandon Boudreaux because they've got their pound of flesh. But I really hope we get the rest of the story. Hey, thanks for watching Profiling Evil. Your support means the world to me. Make sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like up-to-date information, you can also check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you're getting Profiling Evil anytime you're on the go. And if you're really hungry to understand why people do the unthinkable, check out my book, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. That thing is more than just a true crime story. It's a blueprint for recognizing the red flags of coercive control, spiritual manipulation, and cult behavior. The same kind of tactics that we see echoed in the Daybell case. Deceived pulls back the curtains on one of the most disturbing cult takedowns in American history. And it's told from the perspective of a person who was there, boots on the ground. That's me. So if you want to understand how people get pulled in and how justice finally catches up, this is a great place to start. So you can get a signed, personalized copy at profilingevil.com, and I'll ship it for free. You can also sign up for our Bolo digital newsletter while you're online. And if you live outside the United States, you can get Deceived anywhere in the world on Amazon.com. The free shipping is only inside the United States. So sorry, get us on Amazon if you're outside of the States. And thanks again for being part of this community. I'll see you soon at the next crime scene.